Hi, I'm Joe and welcome to Building Florence. Apologies for the indoorness of this introduction, but I forgot to film one while making this episode, so here's episode 7. One of the things I wanted to say is that I'm going to be changing the order of things because the boat's now getting quite heavy to lift and turn, and I'm worried about causing damage. So if I lift it, turn it, and then paint the underside, I think there's a danger that I might scratch and damage the hull, the underside of the hull, if it gets turned again to do the inside. So what I'm going to do is complete the carpentry inside in the interior of the boat, paint it up, and then turn it over and then do the hull. So the hull painting will end up being probably the last thing that happens. I think that's the sensible thing to do. One of the things I've decided to do is to block up these holes. Originally I had wanted them essentially to be a space to access storage, but I think that this is going to have to be a buoyancy tank area, so this is going to be closed off with some access hatches, some round plastic access hatches. So the whole front of the bow is essentially going to be a buoyancy tank, and then there's going to be sort of buoyancy bags under the seats. These were also added to add a bit of lightness or take away a bit of weight, but I'm going to end up adding weight by doing this. I think it's now the only way to make sure I can do this easily. The other alternative would have been to make an internal box, which would have just taken too long. I'm so close to the end now, I think I'm probably about 30 hours, maybe 25 hours away from being able to finish the project. But doing something like that would add in something like 3 or 4 hours, and I'd rather not. While I'm working in this area, I'm also putting in brackets for the sole boards and also for the seat bases here. So that's pretty straight now, and I can put the seats on that base. While I'm waiting for various bits and pieces to dry, I'm going to start chopping up this piece of wood, which is going to go laterally along the seat base towards the cockpit. So these two are going to sit like that and like that. I need to put a little rabbet in the frames for this piece to seat. No, pun intended. It's not fun getting in that corner. When you measure things, isn't it? So I'm just applying a bit of glue. Too much glue by the looks of things. I don't know what's happened to this bottle. Oi! Muggy. But anyway, those laterals are done. It might be necessary to put something in following something like this line here, because that panel is potentially going to be a bit wobbly. So the next thing I'm going to be building is, using this piece of plywood, I'm going to create a mast step, or at least the box for the mast step. You'll remember there's a section down here at the bow where the mast is going to sit, and this is going to provide the space for it, like a guide between the deck or the sort of seat base and the mast step that I made previously, and that's just going to contain it in a little box, and that'll mean that I'll be able to use the bow section as a buoyancy section as well if I need to. First things first, I'm going to measure what I need. This is about 182 millimeters. Which is about 182 millimeters by 45. So I'm just marking a line along here at 182, sorry. 42 on the brain. No bad thing. So that determines the height of the box. So that is one of the sides, so it's only, again. So sorry about that. I was nervous about the rain coming again, so I didn't get the camera out to film building this, but it's nothing special. It's just a really rough box that's going to be hidden from view, and it's going to sit roughly there, and it'll just be a guide for the mast when it sits through, and then I'll put the plywood over the top, cut it to size, and I think that I'm going to have to put some more supports in for the plywood either side there, so it'll rest, so the ply will rest against here, something there, there, and there. Hopefully that will be stiff enough. I've stiffened the cockpit seats today, so hopefully we're getting a lot closer. Another thing I've been working on is this removable sole board. It's just basically like one of those bath or shower mat things, but sort of scaled up. It sits as a sort of false floor in the boat so that there's a bilge below. So it's another day and it's even hotter. So much so that it's making progress quite slow. I've been building up a little bit more of a skeleton for the seat base because I need to offset the flexibility of the plywood that I've got. That's easier in the centre here, but the hardest bit is sort of around the edges. I don't quite know how I'm going to do it because I don't really want to be gluing into the hull at this stage because I've used up all the polyester resin that I've got. I don't really want to have to buy more fiberglass over the top. There's some epoxy resin left, but I was going to use it mainly for filling and sealing. So at this point I don't want to be drilling into the hull or putting anything from either end. So essentially I'm frame to frame. I'm going to have to put in some supports to deal with the seat base. I think I was intending to use a thicker plywood for the seat bases, but unfortunately I went to the shop and they'd run out. Hopefully you can see here that I've been using the scrap wood challenge sort of approach and putting as much strength as I can into this section of floor. You know, I know that when the plywood is added it's going to be stronger than I think, because it always is. And then I need to strengthen the cockpit seats. But before I do that, I'm going to seal off this area. So what's going to happen is I'm going to cut the plywood for this area now. Then I'm going to hoover through here, epoxy the inside, and then apply the plywood for the sort of bow seat area, the foredeck, if you will. And that will be quite exciting. So as you can see, I'm basically making a paper template. And this will determine the minimum size that I need to cut the plywood to, and then I can again, iteratively cut the plywood so it's smaller and smaller, just so that I'm not overcutting as I've done elsewhere. You can see here that I've made the plywood foredeck. I've glassed over some of the edges and I've put some filler in between just to make sure that it's totally secure. Now, the shops have completely run out of any thicker plywood for some bizarre reason. I suppose it's because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So I've decided that I'm essentially going to plank the cockpit seat section. I've got a really short working day ahead of me. So I had to go to the shop to get some timber, so and I think it's going to be quite rainy for the following week, so this is my only opportunity to actually make quite significant progress on the interior of the boat. So I'm not going to be filming a vast amount of what I'm doing. Most of it's quite simple, so we're just talking about sort of sanding down, painting, screwing a few things in, preparing the planks. It's not going to be particularly interesting for you to see, but I'll give you a good overview of what's been done at the end of the day, and hopefully you'll gain a perspective on what's been done. You know, I'm sorry you were going to miss some of that, but I think it's just the only way to actually make proper progress on it today. So I cut the planking for the seats to length, and they look good. I've got a few hours now of drilling and sanding and epoxying, painting, and then I'll show you the finished result. So I've been at it for 3 hot, sweaty days now, making seats, putting in a bit more fiberglass, sealing things, putting in some filler just to round off the edges, doing lots of sanding. I mean, it's still, it's like you could sand and sand and sand and sand and it would still not be ideal. And I think you've just got to decide at some point that enough's enough, and trust that when the paint's applied it's going to look cleaner because it's the same colour. So that's what's going to happen next. Apologies for not having videos over the last few days, but it's just I just needed to crack on and make some progress, and the best way of doing that was just to do it without filming. But I thought you'd like to see the interior being painted, so I'll do a time lapse of that, and then I'll sort of give you a tour. Once everything's sort of then dry and in place, I'll give you a tour around what's happened. The first thing I'm going to do is to apply some of this grey primer, just to those areas that are harder to reach to sand, because the paint won't like adhering to the epoxy because it's just simply too smooth. So I'm just going to spray a little bit of this around at close quarters. Smelly. Well, I thought I had a bit more than that. There might be a different colour. Well, I've got some red. I really like the red with the wood. I'm regretting all my decisions. So we're going for blue. The hull is going to be a darker blue, so I've got a sort of duck egg blue for the interior.
Oh no, I left my trousers off, and now all the world has seen me in the times I did wonder why everyone said cough. Should have seen the ladies' faces as a sign, and remember to always wear long johns just in case you go, forgetting an essential garment like your pantyhose. Always always don your trousers before you leave the house.
First coat of blue and then another coat tomorrow. I'm afraid I liked the red so much that happened. So it's been 3 of the hottest days that I can remember, and it's been quite painful to work on it. That's meant my brain hasn't been functioning very well. After the time lapse, I decided that I would paint the bilge and the foredeck in the red, and that turned out to be quite nice, I think. I'm just really pleased with the way that overall it's come together. I put in the slats for the seats, which I don't think you've ever seen them in place before. Also the sole board is down. These have come out really well, and I think that the oak stain effect works really well with the genuine oak of the gunnel rail. I've put in these little rowlock brackets. This rowlock was spinning freely before I attached it, now it's not, so I'm going to have to do a bit of fettling on that side. This one is a bit better, but I think it's going to need a bit of fettling too, and I'll pack it with grease a little. I've put in, this is all a bit wobbly, I've put in the little hatch doors for the sort of screw hatch doors for the lockers. So these act as access points, so you can use this as, essentially it is a buoyancy compartment, but you can also use it for storage for things like ropes and sheets. And one thing that was quite obvious to me now is that it's large. You know, it's large enough to row in quite comfortably. I think I've got these in roughly the right location. There's room still, I think, for somebody to be sitting in the transom. I haven't tested sitting in this position, although I really want to, but I think it would just wobble over too much. I might have to build some sort of support for it. So the compromise that I made was, if you remember, was fitting these because I couldn't find enough plywood to finish the cockpit seats. And it's one of those things where actually the compromise created something quite nice. And I think the overall effect of the wood is just really good. So I think that's a great place to end this episode. Next time we'll be turning the boat over and sanding the hull and getting that ready for paint. And I think at that point, barring a few other fittings, the strip along the bottom, the rubbing strip, I think it's going to be soon that we're talking about a launch. I'm actually going on holiday over the next couple of days, so like from my perspective, it's going to be a while till I can work on the boat again. So from Heidi, Florence and I, it's time to say goodbye.